Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be talking about my big injury that I got earlier this year. I'll go over a high-level summary of what happened, my recovery process, and where I am now. Then I'll dive straight into some of the questions that I got on YouTube. Hopefully by the end of the video, you'll get some good tips and tricks, and then you will know how to manage your own recovery journey if you were ever to be injured. All right, let's get straight into it. So let's just start with what is a disc herniation. You have this fluid-filled bag thing in between the segments of your spine. So a herniation is essentially when the bag pops and some of the fluid leaks out of the disc. This is a very non-scientific way to think about it, but that's essentially what happened to me. Unfortunately, I don't really have a straightforward answer as to why this happened or how it happened to me. I have always had back issues since I was in my early 20s. I essentially am used to having one back spasm a year, but the year leading up to the herniation, I had 4 back spasms. So I had an idea that something was wrong. I was seeing a few physical therapists and I was seeing a chiropractor twice a week, but unfortunately none of it was really helping, and I still kept dancing through the pain because I was trying to convince myself that it is just muscle weakness or muscle tightness. And the final nail in the coffin was I went to a winter ballet intensive, and I told myself I would modify some of the exercises and not push myself too hard, and that way I won't be injured. By the end of the intensive, I was pretty much limping. On the flight back home from the intensive, when the plane was landing, I knew something was very wrong with my body because I just felt so nauseous and sick. If I had to take a guess, I think the plane landing and the pressure on my spine was what caused my herniation. But of course, like the dancing and everything leading up to it did not help. So after I wasn't able to walk anymore and I finally got my MRI results that confirmed that I had the herniation.
So, I want you to look and see a difference. You see that,
Oh
right?
my
So that's your
God.
problem.
I was put on bed rest and I was on medical leave for my job. The recovery process was super long and just so tough. I'll go more into that when we get to the questions part of it. But essentially, I had to get 2 steroid shots into my back to manage the pain. I was in physical therapy 2 to 3 times a week. So that's kind of the physical side, but the emotional side was also just as tough because I pride myself on being an independent person, and it was just really tough on me mentally to not be able to do the things that I normally would do without the help of Jamie. And I just felt so helpless, and I felt so much uncertainty about whether or not I would ever be back to normal. And as you can tell, I am much, much better now, and I'm so grateful for that. But it was a very, very long process. I was discharged from physical therapy about a month ago, and now I am slowly back in class. So though I'm out of the most difficult stages of recovery, I wouldn't say that I am 100% back to where I was before the injury. All right, let's go straight into the questions. So the first one is, were there any things wrong with your technique/alignment that contributed to the injury? I have kind of a complicated answer. So the first thing is, yes, I definitely think my alignment, especially my hip alignment, could have been a lot better before my injury, and I definitely felt like poor alignment did contribute to the back herniation. But at the same time, I also felt like there were a lot of other factors outside of ballet that actually caused my herniation. So the year that I had the 4 back spasms right before the herniation was the year that I did a cross-country move from Seattle to Pittsburgh, and it was a very, very, very tough year on me. I felt like I made the biggest mistake of my life, and I wasn't really sleeping that much. My stress levels were just super, super high. So I did feel like what I was going through in my personal life was a huge contributing factor to the back spasms, but then it kind of led to a domino effect of the back spasms would shift my hips out of alignment. So even though the back spasms would eventually go away and the pain would be gone, I can move again, I felt like my hips were just kind of shifted or crooked after the back spasms. And the more back spasms I had, the shifts were becoming more noticeable, and I just kept dancing on these more extreme shifts, and I felt like that was just a great recipe for something terrible to happen, unfortunately. My alignment in ballet could have been a lot better, and that is something that I am working on right now. But I also felt like there was just so many other factors going on during that time that it's hard for me to just say, oh yeah, the herniation is 100% ballet related. So the next question is, how do you prevent a back herniation / is it possible? When I think back to right before the herniation happened, I do feel like there were so many things that I could have done better that I didn't, and I definitely regret it because I had a bunch of signals from the 4 back spasms that something was wrong, and I probably should have pushed for an MRI much earlier than I did. I also felt like it was not a good idea to have those 4 back spasms and then decide to do a winter ballet intensive on top of all of that. So yeah, I definitely felt like in that way, the back herniation was preventable in my case. But in a more general case, I do feel like back herniations are normally preventable unless you have a very quick and traumatic injury, like something super high impact, like a car crash or lifting something extremely heavy. But what everybody can do is a bunch of low cobras every day. I'll put a little diagram or some picture of what a cobra looks like. When you are doing a cobra or a low back bend, you are essentially pushing the bulge back into place if the bulge is coming out from a certain direction. So if you have a minute in the morning, just lay down on your belly and hold a very low and comfortable cobra for a minute. So the next question is, did it affect you mentally? For example, any mental blocks? And if so, how did you overcome the mental challenges? During the beginning stages of my injury, I was not in a good mental state, and I spent a lot of time being angry and spiraling about whether or not I was ever going to dance again. I wished I was a more enlightened person and I could handle these types of challenges, but that is the truth of where I was. I just felt honestly also just very angry at myself and at all the medical professionals around me that pretty much failed me leading up to the injury. So yeah, there was a lot of emotions, and these negative emotions made me feel like I had to self-isolate because I didn't feel like anyone was gonna want to hear all this negativity. And as you can guess, self-isolating was not a good idea because it made me feel just so alone and worse than I felt with just the injury. But I will say the number one thing that helped me to get out of my funk during that time was just to spend all this energy and time that I normally would spend towards ballet onto a completely different project. So I originally thought I would just spend a day or two creating some cute ballet sweaters for myself so that I can wear them during the winter when I'm back. And then it completely spiraled to this much bigger project where I was talking to a manufacturer and sending them a bunch of mock designs, arguing with them about the weight of the fabric, the cut of the sweater, the embroidery, like everything about a sweater that you can argue and obsess over, I was essentially doing. But I finally got something out of it. A great way to take your mind off of an injury is to dive into a project that is also very stressful and time consuming so that you would have no more energy left to think about your own injury. But in all seriousness, if you are injured or going through a period of your life where you're just not able to dance and that is tough for you to adjust to, I would recommend just finding another project or another thing to kind of toss that energy into so that you can feel somewhat productive. So the second part of the original question is about mental blocks and overcoming mental blocks. I feel like I have a lot to say here, but I'm gonna try to keep it brief. So I am still really afraid of cambray forward and backwards, so essentially forward and back bends. Arabesques also just terrify me so much now because I have this paranoia that if I do something the wrong way, my disc will herniate again or another disc will herniate and I will be back to where I was at the beginning of this injury. How I was able to quiet a lot of these fears was just through the work that I was doing at physical therapy. So for example, with arabesque, I would start off with just tendu backs. I would kind of lift it 1 or 2 inches off the ground and try to hold it there. And then a few weeks after that, I would try to lift it maybe 2 to 3 inches off the ground. And then a few weeks after that, I would try to lift my leg 2 inches off the ground, but now maybe with a little tiny back bend or with a little weighted ball in my hand. And eventually through that type of slow progression, I was able to eventually lift my leg past 90 degrees. And it took a little bit more time to translate the work that I was doing in physical therapy to class, because yeah, I can do an arabesque to 90 degrees in physical therapy after I'm all warmed up and there are a bunch of eyes on me. But in class, and especially in the drop-in class, I am just afraid that maybe I won't do it exactly the right way and things will go wrong. So it did take even more time to trust myself to do the things I was doing in physical therapy in a normal class setting. But it really came down to building strength and trust with my body. And unfortunately, that type of exposure therapy where you just keep doing something that you're afraid to do and you do it safe enough, your body just naturally starts becoming less afraid of these things. I personally am still working on that today because, you know, I'm doing a little bit more with my dancing now, but I have to tell you, there is a little part of me every time I go into an arabesque where I think, okay, is something about to go terribly wrong right now? And I have to remind myself that I can do it. I have been doing it for a really long time. And if I just focus on the correct alignment and muscles, I will be okay. That kind of fear, I imagine, is going to stick around with me for quite a long time. But you know what? At the end of the day, I'm just grateful to even be dancing at all now. All right, so the next question is about pain management, if I had any tips or tricks. This is also a little bit tricky just because everyone's situation is very unique and pain can mean different things. But in my personal experience, when the injury was new and fresh, the pain for me was a 9 out of 10. It was extremely acute. And there is absolutely nothing I could have done physically that would have helped with the pain. The best thing was essentially to lay in bed and do absolutely nothing. And I bought myself a pregnancy pillow, and that was really, really comfortable and really affordable too. It kept my back really still while still supporting the rest of my body. I was able to sleep for much longer actually when I started sleeping with that pillow. So when I got past that acute injury state and things started becoming less inflamed and I was able to move around just a little bit better, I did notice that walking would increase the pain sometimes, and it was tempting to just stay in bed for a little bit longer and skip the walks. And this is where you really have to talk to a medical professional. For me, I got to a point where walking was uncomfortable, but it was actually beneficial. And as long as the pain was a 3 or 4 out of 10, then I was cleared to walk. But if the pain got any worse, then I had to stop. Even though walking was not completely pain-free for me, I tried my best to do it for as long as I can, because at the end of the day, I felt like that was what helped me to recover a lot faster, just because when you walk, there's more circulation, things heal just a little bit better. And also, it's just nice to get out of the house and not be stuck doing nothing. Pain is a really tricky subject because pain at the beginning of the injury is a signal for you to stop and rest, but pain in the middle of your recovery can mean different things depending on how acute the pain is and how long it lasts. You are much better off talking to a medical professional about this, but that was just my personal experience with pain. All right, the next question is, did you seek physical therapy and were they helpful? Physical therapy was hands down the best thing I have done for my recovery. I have spent a lot of time and money going to chiropractors and massage therapists, and though the massage therapist was kind of helpful, they really didn't do much for me in the long run. And the chiropractor, to be completely honest with you, things felt like nothing, or things got worse for my back. And I'm putting that out there not to discourage anybody from seeking alternative treatments, but to just kind of share my honest opinion. Personally, I am a big fan of non-invasive medical treatments. So if someone was to just magically be able to push the herniation back in, or crack my spine in the right way where I can move again, I was 100% open to it, but that was just not what happened to me. Whenever I went to the chiropractor, my back and my neck would feel significantly worse the next day and the next week. And I have tried multiple sessions thinking that maybe the pain would be different, but that was never the case. It was always just a net negative in my personal experience. So yes, I did seek physical therapy, and I just got very, very lucky that though my physical therapist that was assigned to me was not a dancer, the physical therapist assistant was a dancer, and she helped me significantly. When the herniation just happened, I honestly thought that I wasn't going to be able to dance again, and at least not dance the same way that I did, and that I would be in pain forever. And my physical therapist was super helpful in assuring me that that conclusion was just too dramatic to be making right now. We just started the recovery process. There's just such a long way to go. And maybe that is the case, but given my age and my mobility, realistically, that is not going to be what is going to happen, and that I might be limited, but I might not even notice the limitation, which helped to assure me that maybe there is actually hope into getting back into dance. So my first few physical therapy sessions was essentially targeting and strengthening the muscles that were weak that will help me to support my back when I am back to dancing. So specifically, there was a lot of weightlifting exercises focused on the glutes, the core, and the hamstrings. And when my back started feeling a little bit better and the pain was decreasing, I was able to add on more exercises that were ballet specific, like arabesque and front développés. So yes, that was a long-winded way of me saying physical therapy was really helpful, because I actually got a plan that I can follow and I can actually see my own progression. And I was able to start doing a little tiny bit of ballet stuff that helped to build my confidence to get back into class. So the last question for today is, did you start learning more about human physiology? What did you learn? The answer is definitely yes. Just because I had so much downtime, I learned so much about alignment and just back herniations in general. So I'll start off with back herniations. It is super, super, super common. Statistic I remember reading was that folks over 50 years old in the US, around 1/3 of people have back herniations. Jamie has 2 back herniations actually, or had 2 back herniations, and one was asymptomatic, but the other one caused him some pain. My back herniation, though I only have one, mine was a little bit more extreme than him. And then I know a ton of family, friends, and other dancers that have also had back herniations. So it is very, very, unfortunately, super common to suffer from this injury. And another thing that I learned is that the recovery process for this is super long. Most of the personal stories that I've heard, the recovery is around 1-ish year until you start feeling normal again. I forgot to mention that the herniation, or that thing that looks like a pimple, is pretty permanent. There's no way to get that fluid back in the disc. And so the body will just eat it up eventually, but the disc will always be permanently shortened. My doctors were actually telling me that I should be able to dance in 4 to 5 months, which was definitely not the case at all. I am on my 9th month and I am able to dance pain-free most of the time, but there are definitely still moments when things go wrong. But I was only able to start dancing really at month 8, and I am still slowly kind of getting back into it. My more ballet specific answer is that I learned that proper alignment is really, really important to keeping a healthy spine, on top of also just sleeping and resting and feeling generally okay with being alive. I love ballet so much, and I spend so much of my time working on my strength and flexibility and technique and all that jazz that I really neglected myself outside of ballet because I was just so focused on the physical aspects of things. And I'm trying to do a much better job this time around because I realized that, annoyingly, everything is connected. I'll end this video by sharing a little bit about where I am right now and what's going on. I have decided that I will be focusing more on the quality of my dancing instead of the quantities. I realized that I spent a lot of my time going to classes because I have this anxiety that if I don't spend all of my time going to classes, then I would just not be a good dancer. So I was going so often and not giving my body any break. But when I returned to ballet after my injury, I realized, yes, I definitely have lost a lot of technique, but I have been able to regain a lot of it pretty quickly because I was so conditioned by the time that I returned. And I realized that instead of trying to take as many classes as possible, I need to take only the classes that I really enjoy and give 100% of myself and my focus to those classes. And that is really the best way to move forward so that I can have some kind of balance in my life. And I don't mean for this next part to sound morbid or negative, but I just have become a lot more aware that, you know, the clock is ticking for my dancing. I won't be able to dance the same way forever, and that's okay. But what I want to do with the rest of the time that I have with ballet is to dance and perform in a much more healthy manner. So I'm going to be focused on taking less classes and more on performance opportunities moving forward, and we will see how that goes. As you can guess, there is not a lot of opportunities if you're over 18 years old and not in a professional company, but I will figure it out. It has been a little tough to find the right fit, and I'm still kind of in that transition, but I will let you know how that goes. And I am not the only one aging, right? My parents and my friends are also doing the same, and I would like to spend a lot more time than I have working on those relationships. And I think that would just help me to become a happier and healthier person. So that's kind of my pivot this time around. So I guess the bright side to this injury, if you can say that there is a bright side to injuries in general, is that I am realizing time is precious and I would like to spend more of it with the people that I love. All right, I think that's all I have to say for today. Thank you so much for listening to me blab. Let me know if you have any more questions. And yes, please be on the lookout for this sweater launch. There is gonna be a cream version of it. I have been working on the sweaters for just so long quietly that I am super, super excited for folks to actually be able to wear it and for it to be kind of out in the world. All right, I will see you all another time. Bye everyone.